The notification light on my phone cut through the dim corporate office like a knife. I tapped the screen, squinting against the sudden brightness. My father's text materialized. "Just bring the investment papers, Vanessa." The message blurred as my eyes darted between it and the financial report on my desk, the one that showed how my startup had just secured another round of funding. Success that I'd built from nothing, while he'd been draining my accounts for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed. "Dad, I'm in the middle of closing a major deal. The papers can wait." His reply arrived within seconds. "You always ruin things." The phone slipped from my hand onto the polished mahogany desk. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, a strange coldness spread through my chest, as if my heart had wrapped itself in ice, bracing for a storm I hadn't seen coming. My name is Vanessa. I'm 32 and the founder of a thriving tech company. This is the story of how I reclaimed my life and fortune from the man who tried to take it all. I looked at the financial statement showing my company's growth and wondered how we'd gotten here. The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, my CFO Marcus walked in holding a manila folder, his face carefully composed. "Vanessa," he said softly, "there's been irregular activity in the corporate expense account. Large sums transferred to a private account over the past 6 months." My brain struggled to process his words. "Wait, how much are we talking about?" He slid the folder toward me. "Nearly $167,000. The room seemed to shrink around me as he continued. "The transfers were authorized using your credentials, but the timing doesn't match your normal patterns." My ears rang, but I didn't break. Instead, I remembered the night I'd given my father emergency access to my accounts when I was traveling internationally for a conference. I remembered how unnaturally calm he'd been when I mentioned the company's success. I remembered him dismissing my concerns about security. "It's just a precaution." And then I remembered the screen recording software, the one I'd installed on my laptop for $79.99. The one that logged all account access. I rushed to my home office, yanked the external drive from the drawer, connected it, and hit play. There it was, time-stamped, then clear. Dad's login, the accounts page, the transfer screen. Destination, Renee Williams Personal. My stepmother. My hands remained steady as I copied the file. They didn't shake when I drove to my lawyer's office. They didn't tremble when I handed the recording to her and said, "This is why my corporate account is missing $167,000. She watched, her eyes widening. She looked at me, not with doubt, but with determination. "Vanessa," she said, "we'll handle this from here." That's how the storm began. Not with thunder, but with a whisper, like justice softly clearing its throat. They confronted him at our family dinner. My brother Jason called me afterward, his voice cracking between disbelief and rage. Dad was served legal papers in front of everyone, including Renee. "What the hell?" I didn't flinch. "You really sent lawyers after your own father?" he shouted into the phone. "He stole from my company, Jason," I whispered back. He paused, then scoffed. "You're always so dramatic, Vanessa. You've always made everything about you." That's when I knew he wouldn't believe me. None of them would. They were raised by the same man I was, but somehow they never saw his mask slip. I did, over and over, but they called it exaggeration. They said I was too sensitive. They said I twisted things. So I stopped talking. I sat in my office for another 7 days, watching my team work tirelessly while I pieced together the extent of the betrayal. The forensic accountant said the theft was calculated, happening in small increments over months. Every night, my apartment echoed with what-ifs. What if I hadn't given him access? What if I hadn't noticed the discrepancies? That being a female tech founder was just playing entrepreneur, while the real businessmen did the work. My voice didn't waver. He said I'd end up broke when the bubble burst, that I was wasting my education. Rivera nodded slowly. He's always said things like that. I continued, feeling hollow, but no one ever believed me. They said it was just how he talks. That night, Jason messaged me. We talked him down. He's willing to work something out privately. You better fix this before you ruin everything. I laughed out loud in the quiet of my sleek apartment. Fix this? He still thought I was the problem. They still thought Dad was the victim. But I wasn't afraid anymore because I knew something they didn't. There was more than just the transfers. There were emails. And if they kept pushing, I'd burn the whole house down. Figuratively, of course. But the foundation was already cracking, and the match was in my hand. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The emails started with casual requests. Dad asking for small loans to help Renee start her interior design business. Then larger amounts for investment opportunities that never materialized. Then direct access to my accounts just for emergencies. What they didn't know was that I'd been tracking every penny, every request, every lie. Not because I was suspicious at first, but because I'm meticulous by nature. Spreadsheets don't lie. People do. The first email that truly opened my eyes came 3 years ago. Dad writing to Renee, accidentally copying me. V's business is our retirement plan. Just keep her thinking we're proud. We'll tap the well slowly. I saved it, stunned but not entirely surprised. The second, more damning email came 6 months later, after I'd confronted him about a $15,000 loan that vanished. She's getting suspicious. Remind her about the college fund, how much we sacrificed. That usually shuts her up. I didn't forward these emails to my lawyer. Not yet. I held on to them like loaded guns, final bullets, in case they came for me again. Because they did come. Jason, my sister-in-law Taylor, even Uncle Robert, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. They formed a little army of guilt, banging on my office door while I sat behind my desk, surrounded by the empire I'd built with my own hands. He's getting older, Vanessa. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. You're being vindictive. Family forgives. I let them yell. I let them cry and threaten and grovel in rage. And then I walked out to the reception area, looked Jason in the eye and said, "You're all blocked. You'll never see me or a dime of my money again." Taylor screamed something behind him, but it turned to static in my ears. I was already done with them. Done begging for approval. Done explaining pain. Done proving truth to people who'd rather believe lies. I called my financial advisor the next morning. I asked about trust laws, inheritance structures, power of attorney filings, because Dad's name was still on some of my earliest business paperwork. He'd manipulated his way into advisory status over the years, always playing the supportive father in public while tearing me down behind closed doors. I had it all removed. Advisory role gone. Emergency contact revoked. Power of attorney rescinded. Then I remembered something else, something big. The family trust fund. My grandfather had left a substantial trust before he died. Property and investments he'd protected from Dad's control. When I started my company, I'd added it as a beneficiary, knowing I might need additional capital one day. But I'd forgotten something crucial. Dad still had access as a trustee. That's when the dread crawled back in. That's when I checked the account and saw it. $219, $400 gone, withdrawn in chunks over the past 18 months, disguised as business investments, property maintenance, financial planning services, stolen by the man who'd called my company a pipe dream, by the same voice that whispered poison about how I wasn't cut out for the business world. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't cry either. I poured whiskey into a crystal tumbler, opened my laptop, and started collecting everything. Bank statements, transfer records, email threads, text messages, screen recordings. I compiled it like a war file, because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was war, and I had every weapon I needed. The private investigator I hired didn't flinch when I told him what I needed. He nodded and took the case. While he tracked the money trail, I went to probate court and filed a petition to become the sole trustee of my grandfather's trust with full legal authority. My father tried to contest it, claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I couldn't be trusted with significant assets. But he had no idea what I had. I waited until the hearing, waited until his smug little speech in front of the judge about how he'd guided my career and how I pushed family away out of greed. Then I stood up holding one thing in my hand, a USB drive, with every email, every transfer, every recorded phone call, where he belittled me while asking for money. I asked the judge if I could present this evidence to the court. He agreed. The courtroom went quiet as the emails appeared on screen, one after another. Dad to Renee. Vanessa's so desperate for approval she'll sign anything. The trust is as good as ours. Renee to Dad. We can use the beach house money for my boutique. She'll never check the trust accounts anyway. By the time it ended, you could have heard a pin drop. Even my father's attorney looked like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. The judge didn't even deliberate. He banged the gavel and said, "Full trusteeship granted to Ms. Mitchell. Effective immediately." My father was escorted out for questioning, but that wasn't enough for me. My PI came back with something even better. Proof they'd funneled the $219,400 into an offshore account they held jointly. That money used for a down payment on a vacation property in the Bahamas, a beachfront condo they'd bought as an investment. And the kicker, they'd listed my company as a silent contributor in the loan paperwork, probably hoping I'd never find out. I smiled when I saw it, not because I was surprised, but because now I had both of them. I filed a formal fraud report, turned over every document, every account number, every forged signature. And then I went one step further. I called the IRS. "You steal from me, from my company, you pay in blood and taxes." Jason called the next morning from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. Panicked. Why is the IRS asking about a $200,000 cash investment in the Bahamas? What did you do? I didn't answer right away. I looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, the team photos, the evidence of everything I'd built without their support. Then I said, I did what Dad would never do. I protected what I created. He screamed something about destroying the family. I hung up and blocked him too. Because revenge isn't about loud victories. It's about taking your power back quietly, completely, elegantly, and watching the people who hurt you scramble for cover as the truth burns down their lies. Jason was the first to lose it. The IRS froze his accounts pending investigation. The Bahamas property was seized. The mortgage defaulted. His credit score plummeted overnight. He messaged me at 3 a.m., "You're ruining my life." I didn't reply. He had already ruined mine. I was just evening the score. Though she wasn't blood, Renee was the storm before the collapse. She walked into my office 2 days later, sunglasses on, hair perfect, like the last few weeks hadn't happened, like her fingerprints weren't all over the crime. She walked straight up to my desk. I stood to face her. "I'm in a meeting," I said flatly. "I brought a peace offering," she cooed, setting down an expensive bottle of champagne. "To celebrate your success." I didn't budge. "You're not welcome here anymore." Her smile faltered just slightly. "Vanessa, don't be ridiculous, I'm family." "No," I said. "You're a threat." I handed her the restraining order, freshly printed with the judge's signature still visible. She stared at it like it was in a foreign language. "You wouldn't." "I already did." That's when she snapped, the rage raw, ugly, real, spilling out from beneath her designer mask. "All your father ever did was clean up after your messes. You started a company with no experience, no connections. He opened doors for you, made introductions. And this is how you repay him." I stepped closer. "He didn't open doors, he stole, he manipulated, he sabotaged." She threw the champagne bottle against the wall and stormed out. My assistant watching from the door whispered, "Good for you." 2 hours later, detectives came to my office. I signed the final affidavit, gave them full access to the emails, the bank transfers, the recorded calls. That afternoon, they arrested my father at his country club. The officer who called to inform me of the arrest described the scene. He was wearing an expensive golf shirt and drinking scotch on the patio when they cuffed him. I didn't watch the footage, but I heard the click of the handcuffs echoed across 3 voicemails he left me later, sobbing, cursing, begging. I didn't listen to them all. Instead, I sat in my office after hours, looking at the skyline. The city lights sparkled against the darkness, reminding me of all the nights I'd worked while they plotted against me. I checked my phone one last time before silencing it for good. Jason had posted some ridiculous rant on LinkedIn about betrayal by family and false accusations, but no one was buying it. The court documents were public. People had started commenting, "Maybe don't steal from your daughter's business," and "She deserved better than both of you." Funny how quiet the world gets when the truth finally roars. My name was no longer the burden in family chats. I was the woman who didn't break, even when everything else did. And for the first time in years, I slept without checking my bank accounts. I didn't show up to the court date for their arraignment. I didn't need to. My voice was already in the paperwork, in the evidence, in every damning email that displayed on the courtroom screens. But I did sit outside in my car, engine off, watching the world keep spinning while two people inside fought to keep their lies from catching fire. Dad was hit with wire fraud, conspiracy, and grand larceny. Renee, accessory to fraud, conspiracy, and when the financial report came in, attempted identity theft. The financial report the DA shared with me revealed the awful truth. They'd been using my company's credentials to apply for additional loans, creating shell corporations with my name attached, tanking my credit score when I thought I wasn't looking. That detail shattered something in me I didn't know I still had. I threw up in the parking lot that morning. I cried until I couldn't breathe. And when I finally looked at myself in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't met before, a founder who could burn a city down to keep her company breathing. That same day, I made the final transfer. The trust fund, now cleaned of their fingerprints, went into a secured account under a new corporate structure. I updated all emergency contacts, changed every password, sold the old family home, the one where I found those emails glowing like sirens on my laptop screen. My company moved into a sleek new office building downtown. Nothing flashy, but impressive. I picked the corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows. My team loved it. They called the view a testament to our growth. And I finally started expanding internationally. Market by market. Bit by bit. The fog lifted. One night, months later, I got an email from the DA's office. Dad took a plea. Jason didn't back down. He went to trial. Lost. Got 3 years. Dad got 18 months. Probation after 12 months. He asked to write a letter to me. The court approved it. It came in a cream envelope with his perfect penmanship. I didn't open it. I shredded it, while my team celebrated our biggest client win to date. Because forgiveness is not always owed, especially to those who gamble with your life's work. Some nights when it's quiet, I still hear his voice. Still feel my phone buzz with that text. "You always ruin things." But now I smile because I didn't ruin anything. I saved everything that mattered. And I took back what they thought they owned: my future, my dignity, and my company's legacy. The day of sentencing, I stood across the street from the courthouse. Not inside, not in the gallery, but outside, beneath the bright blue sky, watching people file in like it was just another Tuesday. Jason walked in first. He was thinner. No designer suit this time, just slacks, a button down, and the slump of a man whose life unraveled before he realized the thread was loose. Dad followed. No golf tan, no swagger, just a gray blazer and the hollowed eyes of someone who finally understood he'd gone too far. I didn't flinch. I didn't wave. I just watched. Afterward, a clerk from the DA's office met me on the sidewalk. She handed me the final judgment packet. Inside were the documents signed and sealed. Guilty, sentenced, restitution ordered. Dad owed my company $183,000. Renee, another $42,000. I knew I'd never see a dime. Didn't matter. I had already gotten everything I came for because my business was thriving, growing, expanding, beyond even my ambitious projections. And 1 week later, my team surprised me with champagne to celebrate. I didn't answer right away. Because what do you say about people who tried to steal everything you built while claiming they supported you? I looked around at my real family, the team who'd stood by me through impossible deadlines and difficult decisions. The only family that matters is already here, I said. That was enough. The next day, I changed my number. deleted the old family group chats, unsubscribed from the guilt, the obligation, the generational dysfunction dressed up as love. I made a new will. Set my company's succession plan to include my most loyal employees. The ones who sat through late nights with me, ordering takeout and solving impossible problems. The ones who didn't ask questions, just showed up with solutions, and the kind of loyalty my blood relatives never knew how to offer. For the first time in my life, I chose my own family. And that was the final act of revenge. Not anger, not punishment, but peace. Years passed. Jason's name faded into a background check somewhere. I heard Dad and Renee moved to a modest house in Arizona after their assets were seized. No one visits. No one cares. My company, it's worth 8 figures now. I'm writing my own story, telling it at conferences, and mentoring other women founders. Last night, at a business awards dinner, someone said, "Vanessa, you're the most resilient leader I know." I smiled and whispered, "I'm only resilient because I built something worth fighting for." Because sometimes revenge isn't fire and fury. Sometimes it's a company's growth in the quiet, a clean balance sheet, a name cleared, and a legacy reclaimed. Last week, I got an email with no subject line. Inside was a digital photo of my father, gray hair, casual clothes, eyes hollow as winter, and in the body of the email his words thin and pleading. "I'm proud of what you've built. I think about you every day." I sat with that for a while, not angry, not sad, just still. Because it's strange how people will burn down everything around them and call it support. Stranger still how they're always surprised when you stop letting them light the match. I didn't write back. I took the email, saved it to a folder labeled Past, then archived it. Then I walked to my company's annual retreat with my team. They were planning our next product launch again. The excitement buzzed in the conference room. I dropped the email into my digital trash bin and watched it vanish, swallowed up like all the guilt, manipulation, and betrayal that had tried to steal my narrative. It didn't deserve attention, only dismissal. That night, my team asked why I seemed lighter. I told them, because we're finally free. And we were. Free from toxic voices, free from the weight of pretending it didn't happen, free from thinking blood has to mean loyalty. Today, I woke up energized and prepared a presentation for our investors that would secure our next phase of growth. My assistant brought in my favorite coffee, prepared exactly how I like it, with a dash of cinnamon. She looked at me and smiled. "You always make the impossible happen. Not on special occasions, but every day, creating a workplace where people felt valued and seen." That was the justice. Not a courtroom, not a prison sentence, but a quiet morning filled with purpose and potential. They stole time from me, but I rebuilt it one decision at a time. Now I lead a company filled with trust, not suspicion, with transparency, not secrets, with celebrations that never come with strings attached. Some people spend their whole lives trying to tear you down so they can feel tall. But when you walk away completely, fully, without looking back, they're left yelling into silence. And that silence, that's your victory, that's your revenge. That's your beginning. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was acknowledging that I'd allowed it to happen for so long. Growing up as Henry Mitchell's daughter meant living in a carefully constructed illusion. On the surface, we were the perfect family. Dad, the successful investment banker. Mom, the devoted homemaker who died too young. Jason, the golden son following in Dad's footsteps. And me, the dutiful daughter who was never quite good enough. I remember the first time I showed Dad my business plan. I was 24, fresh out of business school, brimming with ideas and passion. I'd spent months researching market gaps, developing prototypes, calculating projections. I thought he'd be proud. Instead, I didn't take the corporate job he offered. Instead, I rented a tiny office space and launched Mitchell Innovations with my savings and a small business loan. When we landed our first major client 6 months later, Dad didn't congratulate me. He asked how much debt I'd accumulated. That pattern continued for years. Each milestone I reached was minimized. Each struggle magnified. "You got lucky with that investor. That contract won't last. You're working yourself into exhaustion for what? To prove a point?" And then came Renee. 20 years younger than my father, with cascading blonde hair and a background in luxury lifestyle consulting that no one could quite define. She appeared at a family dinner one night, draped in designer clothes and Dad's admiration. Jason welcomed her immediately. I was cautious, especially when she took an intense interest in my company's growth. "Henry tells me you're doing so well," she cooed over drinks one evening, 3 months after they'd started dating. "I've always admired entrepreneurial women. We should discuss investment opportunities sometime." Within a year, they were married. Within 18 months, the first unusual withdrawal appeared in my company accounts. The court proceedings revealed the full extent of their scheme. It wasn't just about the money, it was about control. For years, Dad had been telling relatives, friends, and business associates that he was the silent force behind my success, that he funded my startup, mentored my decisions, saved me from countless mistakes. In reality, he was sabotaging deals behind my back, warning potential investors about my impulsive nature and lack of business acumen. The forensic accountant found emails where Dad had actively discouraged a major tech firm from partnering with my company, claiming I was unstable and not ready for significant contracts. The partnership would have doubled our valuation overnight. I lost that opportunity but never knew why. Until now, that discovery hurt more than the stolen money. It was one thing to take what wasn't his. It was another to deliberately limit my potential out of jealousy or spite. The question that haunted me wasn't why he did it, but how I hadn't seen it clearly before. The signs were always there, wrapped in plausible deniability and paternal concern. "I'm just looking out for you," he'd say after criticizing my latest business move. "Someone needs to keep you grounded," he'd chuckle after dismissing my achievements in front of others. I'd internalized his narrative so completely that even as I built my company, part of me still believed I wasn't capable enough, wasn't worthy enough, wasn't enough. Breaking that mental pattern proved harder than building a multi-million-dollar business. In the months following the trial, I found myself hesitating over decisions I would have made confidently before. I second-guessed strategies, doubted projections, questioned my instincts. The voice in my head still sounded like him. "You're making a mistake. You're overreaching. You'll fail." My therapist called it the aftermath of prolonged emotional abuse. I called it the final bill for believing in family over evidence. Recovery came in unexpected moments. The day my new CFO presented a quarterly report showing 40% growth despite the legal turmoil. The morning a tech magazine featured me on their Founders to Watch list. The afternoon, my youngest employee stopped me in the hallway to say my leadership had changed her perception of what women could achieve in the industry. Each moment was a brick in the foundation of my rebuilt confidence. 6 months after the sentencing, I received an invitation to speak at my alma mater's business school graduation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same institution where Dad had told me my entrepreneurial dreams were unrealistic now wanted me to inspire the next generation. I almost declined, fearing I had nothing worthwhile to share beyond a cautionary tale of family betrayal. My executive coach challenged that assumption. "Your story isn't just about what was taken from you," she said during one of our sessions. "It's about what you built, despite the obstacles placed in your path." That's what those graduates need to hear. Standing at that podium, looking out at faces full of ambition and uncertainty, I didn't share the sensational details that had made headlines. Instead, I spoke about resilience, about trusting your vision when others doubt it, about building support systems based on shared values rather than shared DNA. The world will try to convince you that your dreams are too big, your ideas too risky, your ambitions too grand, I told them. Sometimes those discouraging voices will come from the people closest to you. Listen politely, then prove them wrong through consistent action and unwavering focus. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, eyes bright with unshed tears. "My father says women don't belong in finance," she whispered. "I've been afraid to tell him I've already accepted a position at Goldman Sachs." I took her hand in mine. "His limitation isn't your reality," I said. 10 years from now, you won't regret following your path. You might regret letting someone else choose it for you." That night, I realized my experience, painful as it was, had value beyond my personal growth. It could serve as both warning and inspiration for others facing similar obstacles. Not just entrepreneurs, but anyone whose dreams were dismissed by those who should have been their biggest supporters. This realization sparked a new initiative within my company. We launched a mentorship program specifically for first-generation entrepreneurs, those without family connections or inherited knowledge of business operations. We provided not just funding and guidance, but emotional support for navigating complex family dynamics when success changes relationship patterns. The program, called First Step Forward, became our fastest-growing division. Meanwhile, the legal aftermath continued to unfold. Dad's assets were frozen pending full investigation. The beach property was seized and sold to repay creditors. Renee filed for divorce 3 months into his sentence, claiming she'd been manipulated and was an unwitting participant in his schemes. The courts didn't buy her innocent act, especially after the PI uncovered her history of similar relationships with wealthy older men, each ending in financial disputes. Jason faced his own consequences. The IRS audit revealed he'd been helping Dad hide assets for years, taking a percentage as payment for his services. His accounting license was suspended, and his firm placed him on indefinite leave. Last I heard, he was working as a manager at a car dealership in Nevada. His MBA and prestigious internships rendered meaningless by his choices. I didn't take pleasure in their downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching lives crumble, even lives that had been built partly at my expense. What I felt instead was a profound sense of disconnection, as if they were characters in a story I'd read long ago. Their choices were their own, as were the consequences. My focus remained on building rather than breaking, on creating rather than destroying. The media, of course, wanted a different narrative. For weeks after the trial, business publications and morning shows requested interviews, promising sympathetic platforms to tell my side of the scandal. I declined them all. My company wasn't built on victimhood or revenge. It was built on innovation and determination. That's what deserved attention, not the actions of people who'd chosen to betray my trust. One reporter was particularly persistent, sending daily emails with increasingly dramatic subject lines. Daughter betrayed, the Mitchell family scandal. Tech founders fight against familial fraud. Daddy's little cash cow, how one woman fought back. I finally responded with a single line. When you're ready to discuss our latest software development or market expansion, I'm available. Until then, please redirect your energy towards stories that inspire rather than sensationalize. She showed up at my office the next day with an entirely different angle. Women in tech, breaking barriers and building empires. The resulting profile focused on my business achievements, mentioning the legal issues only briefly as challenges overcome through principled leadership and strategic thinking. It became the template for how I engaged with media going forward, redirecting attention toward creation rather than conflict. As my professional reputation solidified, my personal life began to heal as well. I'd kept people at a distance for so long, afraid of being vulnerable, terrified of being exploited again. Trust came slowly, painfully, like rehabilitating a broken limb. It started with my core team, the people who'd stood by me through the investigation and trial. Then extended to a small circle of friends who'd never bought into Dad's version of who I was. And then, unexpectedly, to Michael. He walked into a charity auction my company was sponsoring, a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and zero. He didn't know about my family drama until our third date, when a waiter recognized me from a news segment. Michael's response was simple. That must have been incredibly difficult. I'm sorry you experienced that. No probing questions, no morbid curiosity, no immediate need to fix or solve or analyze. Just acknowledgement and empathy. It was so different from the reactions I'd become accustomed to that I didn't know how to respond. Later that night, I realized it was the first time someone had centered my experience rather than their fascination with it. It felt like permission to be a complete person, not just a scandal survivor. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately. I kept waiting for the red flags, the subtle digs at my independence, the veiled criticism disguised as concern, the attempts to direct my decisions. They never came. Instead, there was respect for boundaries, celebration of successes, support during setbacks. It was so foreign to my experience that I initially mistook his authenticity for strategy, his kindness for manipulation. My therapist called this trauma armor, the protective skepticism that develops after betrayal. Not everyone is your father, she reminded me gently during a particularly difficult session. Not everyone has an agenda beyond mutual care and connection. Intellectually, I knew this. Emotionally, it took time to internalize. The first time Michael met my leadership team, I was tense, waiting for him to subtly undermine me or claim unearned credit for my ideas. Instead, he listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and later told me how impressed he was by the culture I'd created. "You've built something remarkable," he said as we walked to the car. "Not just the business itself, but the way people light up when they talk about working with you. That doesn't happen by accident." His genuine admiration without any need to insert himself into my narrative was a revelation. It showed me what healthy support looked like. Appreciation without appropriation. Encouragement without control. 18 months after Dad's sentencing, I received a letter from his prison chaplain. Dad had been attending counseling sessions, the letter explained. He'd expressed remorse and a desire to make amends. Would I consider meeting with him as part of his rehabilitation process? My immediate reaction was visceral rejection. Why should I participate in his redemption story? Why should I offer absolution he hadn't earned? I brought the letter to my next therapy session, expecting validation of my refusal. Instead, my therapist asked a question that shifted my perspective. What outcome would serve your healing, regardless of what it does for him? I sat with that question for days, separating my father's needs from my own for perhaps the first time in my life. Eventually, I realized that seeing him, controlled, contained, stripped of power, might help exercise the outsized influence he still held in my mind. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning. I dressed carefully, armoring myself in the CEO uniform I'd perfected over years, tailored blazer, simple jewelry, confident posture. Michael offered to accompany me, waiting outside if I preferred. I declined. This was a circle I needed to close alone. The prison visiting room was neither as grim nor as dramatic as television had led me to expect. Functional furniture, muted colors, the enforced civility of a space where every interaction is monitored. Dad looked smaller somehow. The expensive haircut grown out, the designer clothes replaced by standard-issue garments, the commanding presence diminished by confinement. For a moment, I saw him clearly, not as the intimidating figure of my childhood or the criminal of recent headlines, but as an aging man whose insecurities had driven him to destroy what he should have protected. "Vanessa," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't smile. "I'm here to listen," I said. "That's all I can promise." For the next 30 minutes he talked. About regret, about jealousy, about how watching my success had triggered his deepest fears of irrelevance, about how Renee had played on his vanity, but the choices had been his own. Some of it rang true. Some felt like practiced performance. All of it came too late to change what had happened. When he finished, I didn't offer forgiveness or closure. I simply told him the truth. "I don't hate you anymore," I said. "That would require an emotional investment I'm no longer willing to make. What you did shaped me, but it doesn't define me. I've built a life that doesn't have room for the kind of relationship we had, and I don't see that changing." He flinched as if I'd struck him. Perhaps rejection without anger was more painful than the rage he'd expected. "You don't mean that," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "We're family. Blood. That doesn't just disappear." I stood, gathering my purse and jacket. "Family is earned," I replied. "And you spent years proving you didn't value that privilege. I hope you find peace, Dad. I already have." Walking out of that prison, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was carrying. The need for his approval, his understanding, his acceptance. It had been an invisible burden for so long that its absence felt like floating. I hadn't gone for forgiveness. I'd gone for freedom. And somehow, in that sterile room with its rigid rules and watchful guards, I'd found it. The next chapter of my life unfolded with unexpected momentum. 3 months after that prison visit, Mitchell Innovations was approached by one of the largest tech companies in the world, with an acquisition offer that made headlines across the industry. The figure they proposed was staggering, enough to set up generations of my family in comfort, should I ever choose to have one. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had spent years undermining my business, convinced it was built on sand rather than substance. Now it was valued at 9 figures by industry leaders who recognized its potential. My team gathered in the conference room when the official offer arrived, their faces reflecting the mix of excitement and uncertainty I felt myself. This was the dream scenario for many startups. The lucrative exit, the validation, the chance to see your creation absorbed into something larger than itself. But as I looked around at these people who had become my chosen family, I realized the decision wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. "What do we want?" I asked them, setting aside the formal offer document. Not what makes financial sense or what looks impressive on paper. What future do we actually want to build? The conversation that followed lasted well into the night. We ordered pizza, sketched possibilities on whiteboards, debated pros and cons with passionate intensity. By morning, we had clarity. We didn't want an exit, we wanted expansion. Not absorption, but partnership. I countered the acquisition offer with a proposal for strategic alliance instead. Our technology integrated with their platforms, our team maintaining independence, while gaining access to global infrastructure. It was a bold move that my advisors called risky. They might walk away completely, my CFO warned. This could be the only offer of this magnitude we ever receive. Then we'll build something worth even more, I replied, surprising myself with the absolute certainty in my voice. There was a time when such confidence would have felt like arrogance, the very quality Dad had always accused me of when I refused to minimize my ambitions. Now it felt like clarity, like knowing exactly what I'd built and what it was worth, not just in currency but in potential. The tech giant didn't walk away. They came back with a counter-proposal that honored our core requirements while offering financial terms that surpassed the original acquisition. The day we signed the partnership agreement, champagne flowed in the office, and my inbox filled with congratulatory messages from across the industry. One email stood out from the rest, from Jason. "I heard about the deal. Impressive. Dad would be proud. No apology, no acknowledgement of past wrongs. Just a backhanded compliment framed through our father's hypothetical approval, as if that remained the measuring stick for my worth." I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt after they've been deliberately burned. Some relationships are healthier in their absence than their presence. The partnership catapulted Mitchell Innovations into a new echelon. Suddenly, we had resources for research we'd only dreamed of pursuing, access to markets that would have taken years to penetrate independently, and infrastructure that multiplied our capabilities overnight. It felt like we'd been running a marathon in weighted boots, and someone had finally removed the extra burden. This was what fair opportunity looked like, advancement based on merit rather than manipulation. With this accelerated growth came new challenges. My role shifted from hands-on founder to strategic visionary. I was now guiding a ship too large for one person to control every aspect, which meant building a leadership team I could trust implicitly. My experiences had made me cautious about delegation, about vulnerability, about allowing others to have power over what I'd built. Yet the company couldn't grow if I remained its bottleneck. This transition forced me to examine the lingering effects of Dad's betrayal on my leadership style. Was I micromanaging because of legitimate concerns? Or because trauma had taught me that delegation equals danger? Was I withholding information because of strategic necessity? Or because secrecy had become a protective reflex? These questions led to uncomfortable but essential growth. I worked with an executive coach who specialized in founders transitioning to scaled leadership. Trust isn't just something you feel, she explained during one particularly challenging session. It's something you build through systems and transparency. You don't have to rely on blind faith when you can create structures that allow for both autonomy and accountability. This perspective was revolutionary. I didn't have to choose between total control and complete vulnerability. I could design an organization that balanced both clear reporting mechanisms, distributed authority with defined boundaries, collaborative decision-making with established parameters. Gradually, I developed a leadership team that functioned as a true extension of the company's vision, rather than merely executors of my directives. As the business expanded globally, my personal horizons broadened as well. Michael and I deepened our relationship, moving from cautious dating to committed partnership. His work as a pediatric surgeon gave him perspective that balanced my entrepreneurial intensity. Not everything is a problem to solve or an opportunity to maximize. He reminded me during moments when work threatened to consume my identity. Sometimes life is just to be experienced. On our first anniversary, he suggested a weekend getaway to the coast. No laptops, no business calls, just ocean views and unstructured time. The proposal triggered immediate anxiety. What emergencies might arise in my absence? What opportunities might be missed? What if the company needed me? Recognizing these thoughts as echoes of old patterns, I consciously chose to set them aside. The world wouldn't collapse if I was unreachable for 48 hours. That weekend became a turning point. Watching the sunset from our balcony, hands intertwined, I realized how much of life I'd sacrificed to prove my worth through achievement. How many moments of simple joy I'd postponed, always pushing toward the next milestone, the next validation, the next piece of evidence that I was enough despite what Dad had claimed. Michael sensed the shift in my energy. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I'm thinking about how much time I've spent trying to prove my father wrong, and how little time I've spent figuring out what I actually want, separate from that motivation." He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "What would you do differently if he had never doubted you? If you were building a life based solely on your own desires, not in opposition to someone else's narrative?" The question lingered between us, profound in its simplicity. What did I want when the framework of reaction and resistance was removed? Who was I beyond the identity of the daughter who succeeded despite her father's sabotage? These weren't questions with immediate answers, but they marked the beginning of a new phase of self-discovery. Over the following year, I intentionally explored aspects of myself that had nothing to do with business achievement or family dynamics. I took an art class, something I'd enjoyed in high school before Dad dismissed it as an impractical hobby. I joined a hiking group that tackled challenging trails every month, reconnecting with my body's capabilities beyond stress and exhaustion. I volunteered teaching coding skills to girls from underserved communities, finding purpose in mentorship that transcended profit margins. None of these activities advanced my career or increased my company's valuation. None of them proved anything to the people who had doubted me. They were valuable solely because they brought me joy, connection, and perspective. This exploration of identity beyond achievement didn't diminish my professional drive. It actually enhanced it, grounding my ambition in a more sustainable foundation of wholeness rather than woundedness. As Mitchell Innovations celebrated its 7th anniversary, I made a decision that surprised even those closest to me. I established the Second Chance Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs from backgrounds of family financial abuse. The foundation provided not just seed funding, but legal support, financial literacy education, and psychological resources for navigating complex family dynamics around money and success. Using a portion of my personal wealth from the partnership deal, I created a structure entirely separate from the business. This wasn't a corporate social responsibility initiative or a tax strategy. It was a deliberate attempt to transform my painful experience into support for others facing similar challenges. The foundation's first cohort included 23 entrepreneurs, each with stories that echoed elements of my own. There was Damon, whose parents had drained his college fund to finance their failing restaurant, leaving him to build his software company while working night shifts to pay off student loans. There was Lucia, whose uncle had used her identity to secure business loans, destroying her credit before she turned 20. There was Terrell, whose grandparents had manipulated him into signing over rights to his first patent, convinced he was too young to properly monetize the innovation. Working with these brilliant, resilient individuals gave meaning to my ordeal in ways I hadn't anticipated. During our first foundation retreat, I shared my complete story, not the sanitized version from media profiles, but the raw, complicated truth of familial betrayal and the long path to recovery. Afterward, Lucia approached me with tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "I thought I was the only one who had to choose between my family and my future." That moment crystallized the foundation's purpose. It wasn't just about funding businesses. It was about breaking the isolation that so often accompanies financial abuse, especially when perpetrated by family members. The shame, the self-doubt, the impossible choice between protection and connection. These were universal experiences that flourished in silence and withered in community. As the foundation grew, so did my perspective on the concept of legacy. Dad had been obsessed with financial legacy, with accumulating wealth to pass down, with maintaining appearances, with ensuring the Mitchell name remained associated with success. His vision of legacy was material and egocentric. The true irony was that in betraying me, he had forced me to develop a completely different understanding of what it meant to leave something meaningful behind. Legacy, I realized, wasn't just about assets transferred or buildings named. It was about impact that rippled outward, creating possibility where barriers once stood. It was about transforming personal pain into collective progress. It was about using privilege, even privilege hard-won through adversity, to dismantle the systems that made such adversity possible in the first place. This revelation infused both my business decisions and personal choices with new intentionality. Mitchell Innovations expanded its paid internship program, specifically recruiting students who lacked family financial support. We implemented a comprehensive employee financial wellness initiative, recognizing that many talented professionals carry invisible burdens of family financial entanglement. Our corporate culture explicitly rejected the notion that devotion to work should come at the expense of personal boundaries or well-being. 2 years into the Second Chance Foundation's operations, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting was immediately recognizable. Dad's meticulous script, now slightly shakier than before. He had been released from prison 6 months earlier. According to my attorney, who monitored such matters, he was living in a modest apartment in a neighboring state, working as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing company. The letter was brief, written on plain stationery rather than the monogrammed paper he'd once favored. "I saw an article about your foundation," he wrote. "The work you're doing for young entrepreneurs facing family financial abuse is remarkable. I recognize myself in the problems you're solving. Too late, I understand the damage I caused." Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging truth. You've built something meaningful from the wreckage I created. That takes extraordinary strength. No manipulation. No veiled requests. No expectations of reconciliation. Just acknowledgement of reality and recognition of my achievement on my own terms, not as a reflection of his influence. It was perhaps the most honest communication we'd ever shared. I didn't respond directly, but I didn't throw the letter away either. It joined the archive of documents related to that chapter of my life, evidence not of victimhood, but of a journey completed and wisdom hard-won. Around this time, Michael proposed, not with grand gestures or public displays, but during a quiet evening at home. We were discussing our vision for the future, careers, children, geographic preferences, with the easy candor we'd developed over our years together. In the middle of the conversation, he took my hand. "I want to build that future with you," he said simply. Will you marry me? The lack of drama or performative romance was precisely what made the moment perfect. This wasn't about creating an impression or fulfilling an expectation. It was about choosing partnership with clear eyes and open hearts. I said yes without hesitation, certain in a way I'd never been about any personal decision before. We married the following spring in a ceremony that reflected our values rather than tradition. No elaborate procession, no giving away of the bride, no gendered customs that didn't resonate with our relationship. Instead, we gathered our chosen family, friends, colleagues, mentors, who had supported our individual and shared journeys, in a garden overlooking the city where we'd built our lives. Jason sent a gift with a card expressing regret for his absence. I returned it unopened. Some boundaries, once established, are worth maintaining. Not out of bitterness or revenge, but out of self-respect and clarity about the relationships that deserve space in a well-lived life. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion, and healing doesn't require resuming dynamics that proved harmful. The wedding coincided with major news from Mitchell Innovations. Our technology had been selected for integration into a groundbreaking healthcare initiative that would increase access to medical diagnostics in underserved communities globally. The partnership we'd chosen instead of acquisition was bearing fruit beyond financial returns, creating meaningful impact that aligned with my deepest values. Standing with Michael as we celebrated both our marriage and this professional milestone, I felt a sense of integration that had once seemed impossible. The wounded daughter fighting to prove her worth, and the visionary founder creating industry-changing technology were not separate identities to toggle between, but aspects of a whole person capable of both vulnerability and strength, intimacy and leadership, healing and growth. 10 years after discovering Dad's betrayal, I found myself addressing the annual gala for the Second Chance Foundation. The organization had expanded beyond my wildest expectations, supporting over 200 entrepreneurs and advocating for legislative changes to better protect individuals from family financial exploitation. The audience included business leaders, policymakers, and program participants past and present. When someone tries to define your limitations, they're often projecting their own. I told the gathering, when someone attempts to constrain your potential, they're frequently acting from fear rather than insight. The greatest act of courage is sometimes simply believing in possibilities that others cannot see, especially when those others are people whose approval you've been conditioned to. How do you know when it's time to walk away? I considered her question carefully, aware of its weight. When staying requires you to become smaller than you are, when the price of belonging is the abandonment of your own truth, when forgiveness is demanded without repentance, that's when you must find the courage to begin again, even without the support you hoped would follow you. This conversation, multiplied across hundreds of interactions through the Foundation's work, represented the true alchemy of my journey, transforming betrayal into wisdom, isolation into community, woundedness into compassion, not erasing the painful experience, but integrating it into a larger narrative of purpose and meaning. As Mitchell Innovations continues to grow, and the Second Chance Foundation expands its reach, I often reflect on the strange gift hidden within my father's betrayal. Without that catalyst, I might never have fully recognized my own strength, might never have examined the inherited beliefs that limited my self-conception, might never have built boundaries strong enough to protect the life I truly wanted rather than the approval I thought I needed. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, creating something more valuable and beautiful than the original unblemished vessel. The broken places aren't hidden or disguised. They're highlighted, honored as part of the object's history and character. My life has become a kind of kintsugi, the fractures caused by betrayal filled with the gold of wisdom, resilience, and purpose. Not despite being broken, but because of how I chose to heal. Today, as I mentor emerging entrepreneurs and build a family with Michael, I no longer define myself in opposition to my father's narrative. I've authored my own story, one where success isn't measured by wealth accumulated or power wielded, but by integrity maintained and potential realized. One where revenge gave way to something far more powerful, the creation of a life so authentically lived that the old wounds lost their power to define me. For anyone facing the impossible choice between family loyalty and personal truth, between maintaining peaceful appearances and confronting painful realities. I offer this. Choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of reverence for the gifts you alone can bring to the world. The people who truly love you will celebrate your full expression, not demand your diminishment. And those who cannot, well, their limitations need not become yours. The greatest legacy my father gave me was the opportunity to discover that I didn't need his approval to be worthy. The greatest legacy I hope to leave is helping others make that discovery without paying the price I did. Because sometimes the most powerful response to someone who tried to extinguish your light isn't revenge. It's shining so brightly that others find their way by your illumination. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.